I'm sorry, sweetheart, Nolan Ellison said quietly, crouching down to eye level with his daughter as the upbeat music swirled around them. Daddy's tux is rented and doesn't come with rhythm. Hattie giggled, her messy curls bouncing as she tugged on his hand. But you promised we'd dance at the father-daughter gala, Nolan stood, letting out a sigh that was half exhausted, half amused. All right, short stuff. Just don't tell anyone if I accidentally step on your toes. The community center's ballroom was dressed up to look fancier than it actually was. White string lights, plastic champagne flutes, and rented tablecloths. But to Hattie, it was a fairy tale, and Nolan would be damned if he didn't make that magic real. Swinging her into the center of the dance floor, he spun her in a clunky circle that had her erupting into delighted squeals. He was painfully aware of his scuffed shoes, his off-the-rack suit, and the way the other dads seemed more polished, more put together. But Hattie didn't care. She looked up at him like he hung the moon. Across the room, leaning against the edge of the bar, Kiera Vaughn watched them with a stillness she rarely allowed herself to have. Her black silk dress clung to her curves, her heels were Louboutins, and her clutch cost more than the car Nolan had parked outside. But none of that mattered compared to the way her eyes stayed fixed on the pair in the center of the room. She didn't know them, had never seen them before. But something about the way his arms wrapped protectively around that little girl, the way he twirled like he was dancing in a palace instead of a gymnasium, tugged at something deep in her chest. "Miss Vaughn," the event organizer asked, stepping up beside her. "Just checking if you wanted to say a few words before the charity auction." Kiera blinked, pulling her gaze away. "No speeches," she said softly. "Just keep the spotlight off me." The woman nodded and moved on. Kiera turned back toward the dance floor. She should have left an hour ago. She'd only come because Vaughn Holdings had sponsored the event, and her assistant said it would be good PR if she made an appearance. She hated these things: fake smiles, boring conversations, and people who only wanted her for her money. But then she saw him. He didn't look at anyone else, didn't try to impress. His entire world was that little girl, and it was the first time in a long time that Kiera saw something real. Nolan dipped Hattie again, this time dramatically. She laughed so loud half the ballroom turned to look. "Daddy," she gasped, breathless. "You're gonna drop me." "Never," he said, his voice quiet but firm. Kiera's smile softened. She didn't know his name, didn't know anything about him other than the fact that his tux didn't fit and his shoes had holes near the sole. But something about him made her stay. Later that night, when the music faded and the raffle was announced, Nolan led Hattie toward the snack table. "Can I have 2 cookies?" she asked, already reaching for 3. "Just one," he said, plucking one from her hand. "We've got groceries to stretch this week, remember?" "Yes," she mumbled, biting into the sugar cookie with a dramatic sigh. Kiera, standing only a few feet away, caught the exchange. Groceries to stretch. She tilted her head, curiosity blooming. Was he struggling? He didn't look like the kind of man who asked for help. But she could spot financial strain a mile away. She'd clawed her way out of it once before. She could see it in the way his eyes scanned prices on the snack table, or the way he tightened his grip on his wallet when Hattie reached for a second juice box. He wasn't cheap. He was surviving. "Excuse me," she said, stepping up beside them before she could second-guess it. "Your daughter's adorable." Nolan turned, blinking at the woman who looked like she stepped off the cover of a fashion magazine. "Oh, thanks," he said, clearly unsure why she was talking to him. "She gets it from her mom." There was a pause, one that hung just long enough. "Your wife couldn't be here tonight?" Kiera asked carefully. "She passed," he said simply. 3 years ago." "I'm sorry," she said gently. He nodded. "It's all right. We do okay." Kiera looked down at Hattie, who had chocolate on her nose and was humming to herself. "You more than do okay," she said quietly. Nolan looked at her then. Really looked at her, and for a second something passed between them. A flicker of recognition, of understanding, like 2 people from completely different worlds had found something in common. "You here with anyone?" he asked, surprising himself. Kiera smiled. "No, just came to make a donation, ended up staying for the company." He hesitated, then held out his hand. "Nolan Ellison." "Kiera," she said, slipping her hand into his. "Kiera Vaughn." He didn't flinch, didn't blink. Didn't seem to recognize the name at all, and that was refreshing. "Nice to meet you, Kiera," he said, his voice warm. "You too, Nolan." The raffle was announced, but neither of them moved. Hattie tugged on Nolan's arm, whispering something about wanting to dance again. "I should," he started. "Go," Kiera said, smiling. "She's waiting." He took Hattie's hand and returned to the dance floor, but this time his eyes kept flicking back toward Kiera, and she didn't stop watching him. She didn't leave early like she planned. Didn't hide in the corner or dodge conversations. She stayed, because something about the way that struggling dad danced with his daughter made her heart beat differently. And Kiera Vaughn, millionaire CEO who'd built empires and walked away from love more times than she could count, wasn't ready to admit it yet. But she was falling. By Wednesday morning, the fluorescent lights above Nolan's desk flickered like they were mocking him. He rubbed the back of his neck, staring down at the spreadsheet that refused to balance. Numbers blurred together. Rent was due next week. The car needed a new alternator, and Hattie's field trip money was still sitting in the corner of the counter in an envelope that stubbornly stayed half full. He didn't look up when his coworker Joel dropped a folder on his desk. "Client estimates," Joel muttered. "And there's a woman in the lobby asking for you." Nolan lifted his head. "What woman?" Joel shrugged. "Didn't give a name, fancy coat, heels." "Definitely not billing department." Nolan stood slowly, confused. He hadn't scheduled any meetings, hadn't applied for anything lately. The last time a woman randomly showed up in his life, it was because he'd messed up the carpool schedule. When he stepped into the lobby, his confusion deepened. Kiera stood near the front desk, flipping through a magazine she clearly wasn't reading. Her coat was slung over her arm, and her hair was pulled back in a sleek twist that made her look even more polished than she had Saturday night. She looked completely out of place among the cracked linoleum floors and vending machines that only took quarters. He approached cautiously. "Kiera," she looked up, her entire face lighting up like he'd said something better than her name. "Hi," she said. "I hope this isn't weird. I asked your daughter what you did for work when we were in the parking lot. She said you fix buildings." Yeah, I manage maintenance and facilities for this office complex." He blinked. "Wait, you talked to Hattie. I saw her outside with her teacher when I dropped by her school." "I didn't want to interrupt class, so I just said hello." He stared at her. "Why would you go to her school?" Kiera hesitated, searching his face. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you after Saturday, or her. I wanted to see if you were real or just a moment." Nolan folded his arms, eyes narrowing. "So you tracked me down?" "I asked a 7-year-old one question," she replied, raising an eyebrow. "I'm not a stalker, Nolan, I'm curious. And apparently not great at waiting." He let out a slow breath, torn between being flattered and overwhelmed. "You didn't seem like someone who makes unplanned visits." "I don't," she said. "Ever, I plan everything. Board meetings, vacations, even when I eat lunch." "But something about you made me throw that out the window." She paused. "I brought coffee." He looked down at the 2 cups in her hand. She offered one. "I didn't know how you take it, so I got both. One's black, one's sweet." He hesitated, then took the black coffee. "Thanks. I want to get to know you," she said simply. "If that's all right." He studied her. Every instinct told him this was too strange to be real. People didn't just walk into his life offering coffee and curiosity, not people like her. "I work late most nights," he said. "And Hattie's always with me unless she's with my neighbor or at school." "Then I guess I'll have to work around your schedule." Nolan blinked. "Are you always this forward?" "I've spent my life letting men make the first move," she replied. "Didn't get me very far, so yeah. I'm being forward." He took a sip of the coffee. It was stronger than he liked and a little too hot, but it grounded him. "I don't have time for games," he warned. "Neither do I," she said. "Which is why I'm being honest. I like you. I don't know what this is yet, but I want to find out. I'm not a project," he added, quieter. "I'm not something broken you can fix." Kiera's expression didn't change. "I never saw you as broken." There was a beat of silence between them, heavy with things unsaid. "I have to get back to work," he finally said. "I know," she said, stepping back. "But I'll be at the park near Hattie's school this Saturday, around 2. If you show up, I'll know you're curious too. If you don't, I'll respect that." She turned, heels clicking against the tile, and walked out without waiting for another word. Nolan stood there for a long moment, coffee cup warming his hand, wondering what the hell had just happened. Saturday came faster than expected. Hattie was bouncing beside him on the park bench, swinging her legs and clutching a juice pouch. "Is that the lady with the shiny shoes?" Nolan followed her gaze. Kiera was sitting on a picnic blanket under a tree, wearing jeans and a soft sweater, her shoes kicked off beside her. She looked nothing like the woman from the lobby. "Yeah," he said. "Are we going over?" He didn't answer right away. She nudged him. "Daddy, she brought snacks," he sighed. "All right, but just for a bit." Hattie was already halfway there before he finished the sentence. Kiera looked up as they approached, smiling like she'd been waiting all day for them. "Hi," she said, offering a container. "Apple slices and peanut butter, unless someone has allergies." "No allergies," Nolan said, settling onto the grass beside her while Hattie dove into the snacks. For a while, they sat in a comfortable quiet, watching Hattie chase a butterfly across the lawn. "She's got your focus," Kiera said softly. "She's got her own kind of fire," he replied. Kiera turned to him. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't either," he admitted. "What made you change your mind?" He looked down at the grass, then back up at her. "You didn't try to impress me, you just showed up." "I don't think I've done that for anyone in a long time," he nodded slowly. "Me neither." They were quiet again, but it felt different this time. Like something had shifted, not rushed. Not forced, just beginning. The Saturday after the park, the air was thick with the scent of late spring fresh cut grass, warm asphalt, and the faint trace of honeysuckle from the bushes near Nolan's building. He held Hattie's hand as they walked up the steps to the brownstone, her backpack bouncing with each skip. "Miss Carla said I can bring one grown-up to the art show," Hattie announced. "I told her I'm bringing two." Nolan paused at the door. "Two," she looked up at him, eyes wide. "You and Miss Kiera." He exhaled through his nose, unlocking the door. "That's not really how it works, Bug." She said I could. She even wrote it down. Nolan didn't answer. He wasn't sure what to say. He hadn't mentioned the park visit to anyone, especially not to Hattie's teacher, and he definitely hadn't expected Kiera to become part of their conversations so quickly. Inside, the apartment was dim and tidy, the way it always was. He set her backpack down and checked the fridge. A single takeout container sat on the second shelf, and a loaf of bread balanced precariously beside a jar of mustard. He made a mental note to pick up milk. "Do you think she'll come?" Hattie asked, climbing onto the counter and swinging her legs. "I don't know," he said. "You like her," she said. He turned to look at her. "You don't even know what that means." "Yes, I do. You look at her like you're thinking a lot." Nolan raised an eyebrow. "That's not what liking someone is." "It is when you're a grown-up," she said with a shrug. He tried not to laugh. "Eat an apple." Across town, Kiera leaned back in the window seat of her penthouse, her laptop balanced on her knees and a cup of jasmine tea growing cold on the side table. She barely glanced at the spreadsheets glowing on her screen. Her mind was still at the park, back on the grass where Hattie had offered her half a granola bar with sticky fingers, and Nolan had leaned back on his elbows, watching them both like he hadn't relaxed in years. She should have been at a strategy meeting that afternoon. Instead, she'd told her assistant to reschedule. She tapped her fingers against her thigh, then closed the laptop and stood. In the back of her closet was a garment bag, one she hadn't touched in months. She unzipped it and pulled out a simple navy dress, the kind of thing one might wear to a school function. She held it against herself in the mirror, then turned slightly too formal. Too casual. Why did she care? She dropped it onto the bed and pulled out her phone. No messages, no missed calls. Just the silence that always followed when she stepped away from her world. She didn't want to step away anymore. She wanted to step somewhere new. The next day, Nolan was tightening a pipe beneath a restroom sink at the far end of the building when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. The wrench slipped once, grazing his knuckles. He winced, squeezing his hand to keep the blood from rising. By the time he finished, his phone had 4 missed calls, all from an unknown number. He wiped his hand on a rag and stepped into the hallway, dialing it back. "Kiera Vaughn," came the reply. "It's Nolan," he said, leaning against the wall. "You called?" "I did," she said. "I have a question." He waited. "There's an art show at Hattie's school this Friday," she continued. "She invited me." He blinked. "She told you. She found my number in your phone and called me herself. Said she memorized it when you left your phone on the kitchen counter." Nolan dragged a hand down his face. She's 7. She's persistent, Kiera said. I told her I'd ask you first, he exhaled. It's just supposed to be for parents. She said it wasn't. Nolan could picture the exact expression Hattie must have made: wide eyes, earnest voice, hands clasped like she had a secret. She doesn't usually open up to people like that. Kiera's tone softened. I know, he hesitated. It means a lot to her. I got that impression. Then I guess you should come. She didn't speak for a moment. Then, I'll bring flowers. The art show was held in a narrow hallway lined with construction paper frames and glitter that crunched beneath every step. Hattie's drawing was taped between 2 oversized collages. Hers was a crayon sketch of a woman with long hair and a man with a crooked smile holding hands with a little girl in a pink dress. That's you, she told Kiera, pointing at the woman. And that's Daddy. Kiera crouched, brushing a curl off Hattie's forehead. You made me look very tall. You are. Beside them, Nolan's expression was unreadable. She even gave you a bow in your hair, he said. It's artistic license, Kiera replied. The classroom buzzed with chatter and camera flashes. But Nolan stood still, watching Kiera with his daughter like she'd always belonged there, like she was part of something he hadn't realized was missing. Afterward, they walked out into the parking lot together, Hattie skipping ahead with a cupcake in each hand. She drew you, Nolan said. I noticed. She doesn't draw many people. Kiera glanced at him. Are you all right with this? He took a breath. I didn't expect it. That's not what I asked. No, he admitted, but I'm starting to be. Kiera looked up at him, the streetlights casting halos on the pavement. She's a good kid, she said. She really is. And she paused. You're not what I thought you'd be. I could say the same about you, she stepped closer. Then let's stop guessing. Nolan didn't move. His eyes searched hers, and for a moment the noise of the parking lot faded. I don't know what this is, he said. Neither do I, she whispered. But I want to find out. He didn't answer. He just leaned down slowly until their foreheads touched, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was bracing for something to fall apart. Rain tapped softly against the window panes of Nolan's apartment as he stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, elbow deep in dishwater. The apartment smelled faintly of cinnamon Hattie's idea after she'd insisted on baking muffins from a box mix that afternoon. A few of them sat cooling on the counter, some lopsided, one completely collapsed in the middle, but she declared them a masterpiece. He glanced toward the living room. Kiera was sitting cross-legged on the floor, helping Hattie string beads onto a length of yarn. The girl's tongue poked out slightly in concentration, while Kiera leaned over to tie the knot with the kind of patience that came from effort, not instinct. Nolan dried his hands and leaned against the doorway. You're getting better at that, he said. Kiera looked up. I've had an excellent teacher, she replied, motioning toward Hattie. Hattie held up the finished necklace, proud. This one's for you, she said, dropping it in Kiera's lap. It's got a flower, a heart, and a star, for nice, love, and brave. Kiera's eyes softened. I've never had a necklace like this. She slipped it over her head, letting it rest against her silk blouse without a trace of irony. She usually only gives those to people she really likes, Nolan said. Hattie beamed. Later, after Hattie had fallen asleep curled sideways across her bed with glitter still stuck to her fingers, Nolan walked Kiera to the hallway. It had stopped raining, but the smell of wet pavement lingered through the open stairwell window. She paused before descending. She's extraordinary, she is, he said quietly. Kiera turned to face him. You know, I've spent years around people who pretend to care about everything, business, status, image. She hesitated. You don't pretend. With you, everything's real. I don't have the energy for anything else. That's exactly why I keep coming back. He hooked his thumbs into his pockets. I used to think that the best I could do was just keeping things steady, keeping Hattie fed safe. I didn't think anything beyond that was meant for me. And now I'm starting to believe maybe I don't have to do it all alone. Kiera stepped closer. You don't. He reached for her hand, brushing his fingers against hers. I don't know what to call all of this. But when you're here, it feels like life's not just happening to me anymore. Like I'm actually in it again. Kiera smiled, not in the polished, practiced way Nolan had seen her do at the gala. This one was unguarded, like something in her had finally exhaled. I have something for you, she said, reaching into her coat pocket. She pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to him. He opened it. It was a sketch, crude but heartfelt. A stick-figure version of him, Hattie and her, holding hands beneath a bright sun and a house with a crooked roof. I found it taped to the side of my briefcase, she said. She must have snuck it in when I wasn't looking. Nolan studied it. She's drawing a lot more lately. She told me she wants to be an artist when she grows up. She used to say astronaut. That changed fast. She said astronauts wear helmets and she wouldn't be able to see her crayons. He laughed, then shook his head. She's going to break the world open one day. She already has, Kiera said softly. At least for me. For a long moment, they stood in the quiet stairwell, the weight of everything they hadn't said hovering between them. Then Nolan reached up, cupped her cheek, and kissed her. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't uncertain. It was the kind of kiss that came from knowing, not guessing what you wanted. When they pulled apart, Kiera rested her forehead against his. I don't want to leave tonight, he exhaled. Hattie's asleep. Couch is yours. I wasn't talking about the couch. He looked at her, surprised. You're sure? I've never been more. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows as they sat together on the fire escape, coffee mugs in hand, Hattie still asleep inside. Below them, the street buzzed with early weekend life, but up here, it was quiet. I have a proposal, Kiera said, setting her mug down. Nolan raised an eyebrow. You're full of surprises. I want to offer you something, she said. Not charity, not a favor, a partnership. He tensed. Kiera, let me finish, she said. I've been looking at expanding Vaughn Holdings into community development. Real projects, not just buildings, but people. I need someone with practical knowledge, someone who knows what families need on the ground level, someone who's lived it. You want me to work with you, he said, stunned. I want you to help me build something better, something real. I trust you, Nolan, and I can't think of anyone more qualified. He was quiet for a long time, then he nodded slowly. All right, let's build something. Weeks passed. The project moved from sketches to blueprints, from conversations to action. Nolan found himself in meetings with architects, community leaders, and contractors, all of them listening when he spoke. Kiera stood beside him in every room, not leading him, not shielding him, but standing beside him. Hattie's drawings now included buildings with gardens, kids playing in courtyards, and a woman in heels standing next to a man with messy hair and rolled-up sleeves. And Nolan's apartment, once a quiet place of routine survival, now pulsed with something new. Laughter, mess, music, and a future. The gala came around again, almost a year to the day from the first one. This time, Nolan wore a custom tuxedo, one tailored to fit him perfectly. Kiera was in a deep violet gown, her hair pinned up with tiny gold stars. Hattie wore a dress with pockets and insisted on carrying a glittery handbag for important things. As they stepped onto the ballroom floor, Nolan looked around. Last year, he danced with his daughter and felt like the poorest man in the room. Tonight, he held Kiera's hand in one, Hattie's in the other, and felt like the richest man alive. And when the music started, he didn't hesitate. He danced. The soft clatter of forks against porcelain was the only sound in the rooftop restaurant as waiters slid between candlelit tables, their steps silent over the marble floor. A string quartet played low in the corner, and the skyline shimmered behind glass walls that revealed the full sweep of the city below. Nolan reached across the table, brushing his thumb over Kiera's knuckles as she stared out toward the horizon. I didn't think places like this were real, he said. They usually aren't, she murmured. Not like this, not without someone you want to share it with. He studied her. Her expression had changed over the past few months, less guarded, more present. She no longer looked like a woman waiting for something to go wrong. He lifted his wine glass. To things we never expected. She clinked hers lightly against his, and didn't know we needed. After dinner, they stepped onto the terrace. The night was cool, the breeze lifting strands of her hair as she leaned into his side. You've been quiet all evening, she said. I've been thinking. That sounds dangerous. He turned, pulling a folded piece of paper from his jacket. Hattie gave me this yesterday. She took it, unfolding it carefully. The drawing was simpler than usual, a tree, a house, a trio of stick figures. But this time, Kiera had a crown and Nolan held a giant key. She said I was the queen because I helped take care of the castle, Kiera said softly. What's the key for? She told me it's for unlocking everything. I think she meant us. Kiera looked down, her eyes tracing the crayon lines. She sees more than most adults. She's had to. He reached into his pocket again, this time pulling out a small velvet box. Her eyes widened as he opened it, revealing a delicate ring set with a single diamond and 2 tiny sapphires on either side. I don't want to wait, he said. Not because I'm rushing, because I'm sure. You walked into our lives and started building something we didn't know was missing. You didn't just love me, you saw me, all of me. Kiera blinked quickly, her throat tightening. I want to give Hattie a home that doesn't feel temporary anymore, he continued. And I want to give you something permanent too, something real. Will you marry me? She stared at him, stunned silent. Then, without a word, she nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks as she wrapped her arms around his neck. Yes, she whispered against his skin. Yes, I will. 1 month later, they stood beneath a canopy of white wisteria in a garden tucked behind the city museum. The ceremony was small, just close friends, a few colleagues, and a row of folding chairs filled with children from Hattie's class, all buzzing with excitement. Kiera's dress was simple, elegant, and utterly perfect. Hattie wore a matching flower crown and clutched a bouquet nearly as big as her head. Nolan stood at the altar, his suit pressed, tie slightly crooked just enough to still be him. As Kiera walked down the aisle, Hattie stepped beside her, holding her hand as they moved together. Nolan didn't look at the guests, he only watched them. The vows were short. Honest. Nolan promised to stand beside her, not in front or behind. Kiera promised to never build walls between them. Hattie handed them the rings. And when Kiera's fingers slid into Nolan's, and the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the applause felt like a chorus of new beginnings. The reception was held in the same garden, strung with lanterns that swayed gently in the breeze. There was no ballroom, no red carpet, just laughter, music, and the clink of glasses beneath the stars. Kiera sat on a bench, her heels kicked off beside her, watching Hattie teach Nolan to waltz in the grass. The girl counted steps aloud, spinning in circles until she collapsed in a fit of giggles. Nolan scooped her up, tossing her over his shoulder to more peals of laughter. Kiera's mother approached, a glass of champagne in hand. He's good with her, she said. He's everything with her, Kiera replied. Her mother sat beside her. You look happy. I am. There was a pause. I wasn't sure when you started this, her mother admitted. You've always kept people at a distance. I thought you liked it that way. I did, Kiera said, until I met someone who didn't ask to be let in. He just showed up and didn't leave. Her mother smiled. That's how the best ones do it. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the lanterns had dimmed, Nolan carried Hattie upstairs to her room in the brownstone. She was already half asleep, her crown tilted sideways, her hands sticky from cake frosting. He tucked her in, brushing a curl from her cheek, then turned to find Kiera standing in the doorway, barefoot, her dress trailing behind her on the wood floor. She insisted on keeping the crown, he said. She earned it. They stepped into their bedroom, the door closing behind them. Kiera sat on the edge of the bed, reaching for his hand. So, she said, we're officially married. Feels like we already were. Now it's legal. He leaned down, kissing her shoulder. I still can't believe you said yes. I said yes because I knew, she whispered. From the moment you danced with your daughter like the world didn't matter, I knew. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. The next morning, the sound of laughter echoed through the kitchen as Hattie tried to flip pancakes and failed spectacularly, batter streaking across the counter. Kiera stood beside her, guiding her hands while Nolan poured coffee and pretended not to notice the mess. Outside, the city hummed to life. Inside, their home was filled with warmth, chaos, and something neither of them had dared to hope for, love that showed up unexpectedly and stayed. Forever.